Hi everyone. With walking self-forgiveness, a point to consider within and as one's application of walking of and as self-forgiveness is realizing the extent of what self is in fact accessing within, during, and as walking self-forgiveness of a particular specific point or part or experience or reaction or thought that self experienced within a particular moment or day or memory. Understand that within the application of self-forgiveness, the moment one starts with the very words, either written or spoken, I forgive myself for accepting and allowing myself, or I forgive myself that I haven't accepted and allowed myself to realize that. In that moment, one is taking the step of taking self-responsibility for what self is applying self-forgiveness for and of. And in that step, that action of taking that responsibility within the moment of the application of self-forgiveness, one stand equal to and one with that point that you are forgiving and taking self-responsibility for. Because in the action of responsibility, you're saying, I'm taking my power back as what I accepted and allowed as that point and part of me. And in taking my power back, I am applying responsibility, and within responsibility, as taking my power back, I can thus stand up within it and change it as myself. Because within taking responsibility, one stop that relationship of separation towards that something or part or system or construct or thought or memory that self is forgiving. And in severing that relationship of separation, standing equal to and one with that point of part in self-responsibility, which is in essence giving self the power, the responsibility to change it, to make a change as self. So immediately within starting the walking and application of self-forgiveness, either written and spoken, one, take one's power back, sever separation, and stand within responsibility, which gives one the ability to respond to one's actions, acceptances, and allowances as behaviors and expressions of and as the mind consciousness system. And so direct self within what self accepted and allowed. And in that direction, what direction means, what directing self means, is being the directive principle of what is happening within self and one's world and one's reality. Because previously, what one accepted and allowed within separation was having thoughts, reactions, emotions, feelings, memories, the past, the future, consciousness, all of it direct control and influence and determine who self is and how self live and experience self within self. Where one was completely enslaved to pre-programming, living on automation, in complete separation of one's own human physical body, and so in complete separation of, in fact, being a responsible self-directive living being within self's physical and self's world. So self-forgiveness assists and supports self to establish that point of self-awareness where you become aware of how it is that you are in fact living as consciousness, as the mind, and the extent to which thoughts and reactions in fact control, influence, and determine how self experience self and how self live. And many human beings utilize the excuse, reason, or justification of stating that thoughts and reactions are natural and normal. but such human beings think or believe that they're in control of their thoughts and reactions, that they are directing their thoughts and reactions, when in fact, when one slows oneself down in breath, one will realize that you're not in control of your thoughts and reactions. Your experiences within yourself comes up first, resonantly, as like reactions towards your environment. From those experiences, your mind consciousness system formulates a response as reaction towards people in your environment, and the response is equated according to particular specific personalities in your mind consciousness system that will accordingly calibrate your external environment and people within it to assess which personality is most effective to become possessed by. And so one suits oneself up in personality suits, and then one will accordingly speak or behave in particular specific ways. And all of this happens in like nanoseconds, like in a quantum mind consciousness system reality, as all the conscious, subconscious and unconscious mind programs that in fact function within a particular specific moment as one interacts in one's world and one's reality. And that is why we emphasize breathing, walking as breath, because in walking as breath one walk within the rhythm of the physical, of the human physical body. And in walking with the rhythm of the physical as breath, being here with your breathing, you're assisting and supporting yourself to assess who you are within your decisions as you're speaking, and your actions in your world and your reality, so that you physically establish yourself within your physical, to so be able to start in fact seeing, realizing, understanding how and the extent to which your mind is in fact directing, controlling, influencing yourself, your behavior, and your experience, and so your relationships, and so your decisions. Therefore, the process of self-forgiveness that one will walk is, and I'm first describing the technicalities so as to understand, see and realize the nature of self-forgiveness in relation to the mind, the physical, and one's process. Because in understanding who one is as living and applying self-forgiveness, the application, expression, or living of self as self-forgiveness makes more common sense, so to speak, makes more sense. And in that it makes one's experience, application, and living of self-forgiveness so the more exhilarating, because one comes to realize, see, and understand who self is and how self live and behave in ways that one could never have conceived possible. And yes, when you start seeing, realizing, and understanding the extent to which one deceive and manipulate and hide and gossip and backchat and react, it's quite daunting and frightening initially, but within and as walking self-forgiveness effectively, you see the fuck up, but at the same time you see the solution. It's like being the question and the answer at the same time. Within having the ability to ask the question, you actually in fact already have the answer. So with self-forgiveness, you are releasing yourself from the pre-programming, the separation, the deception, establishing equality and oneness with self. In relation to that point, you are forgiving, establishing responsibility, taking your power back, and at the same time you'll see within yourself forgiveness and walking it effectively. And this is also an indication of when you're actually walking your self-forgiveness and self-honesty, is that you'll see the self-corrective application or the solution within what you're forgiving at the same time. So know that if you're still walking your self-forgiveness, and while you're walking or applying your self-forgiveness and there's still reactions that come up inside you while you're speaking it or writing it, it means that you still have to dig through this point you're forgiving, and walk through layers within yourself. It's how you layered this point into and as various dimensions and networks, and crossed it into and through various personalities and times and alternate realities within yourself, until you get to the actual real point of how you created this mind point that you are facing through and walking within self-forgiveness. So it's like you're literally standing within an entire total network, and you've got to like unstring it all, unravel it all. And while you're unraveling it, the process of unraveling is or may be experienced within a resistant, reactive nature, because it's like you're in this maze and you can't find your footing or your foothold, and all you're seeing is just problems and mess and this deep dark pit of a conglomeration of just absolute fucked upness. What you do is, what is your stability? You have you here within your physical as breath. Always return to your physical. If you feel things get too much while you're applying or walking self-forgiveness, return to breath, breathe, be here, and then within that stability of breathing, find your point again, find a thread, and then continue walking it with self-forgiveness. And so you walk it and you write it and you speak it, until you feel that as you're walking and you're writing and you're speaking your self-forgiveness, your reactions within yourself start diminishing and start lessening, until you actually start feeling empty. There's like a stability that comes within yourself. Now be careful to not also perceive stability as like a lockdown or a mind shutdown, where you are deliberately keeping yourself from accessing you as what is required to be faced. It's like a protection mechanism the mind consciousness system utilize within itself, as like trying or attempting to manipulate from self facing self through like shutting down. And this will be indicated by thoughts like, I don't know what to write, or there's nothing here, or I have nothing to forgive, or I don't know where to start, and things like that. All of that is simply mind manipulation in an attempt to not face itself. It's like a fear mechanism, actually. It indicates a point of fear. So then go back to what it is that you were initially wanting to forgive, and have a look at the relationship with self in relation to that point within the context of fear. What is it that you're fearing of that point? What would happen if you change within that point? So have a look at, why would you not want to face that point as you, or change that point of view? What is it that you want to hold on to? What is it that you don't want to give up? What is it that you think or perceive you're going to lose if you change at that point? So within that, you can thus identify what's the fears, and then start with forgiving the fears of facing that point. Stability comes when you've actually walked self-forgiveness extensively, and you've walked the points out within yourself, and you can see that there's a consistent flow of self-forgiveness as the point naturally just unraveled within yourself, and you get to a point of silence within yourself where you physically feel, I'm here, I see this whole point, and this whole point of what you accepted and allowed as the mind opened up through the self-forgiveness, and you can see what you accepted and allowed, how you've deceived yourself, how you've manipulated, how you victimized yourself, what games you've played. And within that, you'll simultaneously see the self-corrective application, the solution that is required to be able to effectively make a change of an as self in relation to that point within self and self's world. And so one incorporates self-forgiveness with one's self-corrective application or living. And here are some technical, practical self-forgiveness points to take into consideration and see the extent of and support and assistance and pillar that self-forgiveness become as one walks self as one's mind consciousness system, and realize that self-forgiveness is in fact the living action or application of taking one's power back, stopping separation within self, standing equal to and one with points, so that within that equality and oneness one can change as the point that one is facing as self, to in fact live real change within self and one's world, to let points go and to find solutions of self and self-living that stand within the principle of what's best for self as all equal and one. Thank you.